Welcome to this webinar on how to make your property portfolio net zero whilst avoiding some of the costly and common pitfalls. I'd like to thank the panel of experts that join me today. You'll be hearing from them later in the presentation. Currently, the UK has national targets, of course, to achieve net carbon zero by 2050. That's quite a time away, but to give ourselves even a fighting chance of achieving that, we will need to have made a lot of progress by the end of this decade, by 2030. Many people have argued for a long time that we need carbon footprint of energy to be properly reflected in the energy prices to drive us all to better solutions. That's not really happened, but of course recent energy price hikes have really achieved the same sort of result, in that we're all now looking very hard at how to reduce our energy costs and hopefully at the same time our energy carbon footprints. This session is to show the example of some hotels. We're going to start specifically with the Runnymede Hotel, and it's one you may well know. It's on the M25-M3 junction and is commonly used as a meeting point for businesses, having a big reception area right on the Thames with beautiful views across the Thames. Before we dive into the specifics of the hotel, one thing that's common across all analyses of these types of projects is that we need to understand the current energy use. So this is an example of a large hotel again, and the top right hand graph here shows you the average 24-hour electrical use for the hotel across the 24-hour period, and we've superimposed on that a fairly large solar PV array to see the impact that array has on the energy use of the hotel. The graph below shows you the red bars are the current use and the green bars are what can be contributed by solar PV at the different times of year, at the different times of day as well. So if I show that in a more clarity, what that means is that the green line is the total generation through the year. The yellow line is the amount that would be exported if we don't change anything about that hotel. So just adding the solar PV array will mean that we will use some, we will save some of the energy from the grid, but we will export quite a lot of energy. So that also represents the opportunity line, really, in showing us where we can use the energy we generate on site to reduce the fossil fuel burning for the rest of the heat requirements for the hotel. So having completed that sort of analysis, we then look at the site to see what are the opportunities and threats that exist on the site. This is the overview, aerial view of the Runnymede Hotel. You can see it's in a location right close to the M25, right on the Thames, with frontage to the Thames, and a fairly constrained site, constrained by the M25 on this side and the roads to the rear. So not a huge amount of scope for extra space, really. If we zoom in a bit closer, we start to look for the opportunities that this site offers. This is Bell Weir, and clearly the weir itself has the opportunity for Archimedes screw turbines, and we'll have a look at that because that's a great generation opportunity. We have got the parking areas within the hotel, so there's a little bit of treed and landscape ground around, but not enough for any ground arrays. But we could look at the hotel parking area and consider canopy arrays to cover those areas, and there are some opportunities for roof space, although not much, and again we'll have a look at that in a moment. The other great opportunity that this site has is that the Thames itself, of course, is a great huge body of water that is moving downstream all the time, and therefore offers us a great opportunity to use it as an energy source for the hotel. To give you a feel of the scale of the Archimedes screw turbines, These are 150 kilowatt turbines, so they each generate something like 1.3 million kilowatt hours a year. So very substantial generators. And on the Runnymede Hotel site, we'd looked at putting 3 of these in, which would have generated or will generate about 4 million kilowatt hours per year. Of course, if you attach that to a ground source heat pump system, you are then able to multiply out that into a heat delivered by multiplying that by 3, 4, or even 5 in the heating season. So we're talking about something that is the right scale for a hotel of this size. Quick analysis of the PV, the solar PV opportunities. These blocks of blue are the canopies that we could consider. Canopied PV is expensive, much more expensive than ground or roof mounted is the cheapest, but it would allow fairly substantive areas and not generating to the scale of the Archimedes screw turbines, but enough to make a difference. The 2 orange areas are roofs that are available for PV. The vast majority of the rest of these roofs, as you can see, are taken up already with other plants and so not available for solar. This slide shows an installed system at the Runnymede. So these 3 stainless steel spheres are the tops of floating pumps in the river that pump the water up to a heat exchanger by the plant room. And we've got enough pumps here to allow us to run 400 kilowatts of ground source heat pumps, and we have the Environment Agency agreement license to allow us to go up to that level. We also have in principle agreement that we could take that up a lot further and maybe get up towards a megawatt if we can develop the system further. On the right you see the first of the heat pumps that have been installed. So this is a 100 kilowatt variable speed drive inverter driven heat pump, and it heats this cylinder, which then preheats all of the incoming cold water supply to the hot water system up to between 50 and 60 degrees, depending on the flow rates at the time. So that's got plenty of scope to expand and is currently running at the Runnymede now. Avoiding common and costly pitfalls is obviously important because we're talking about serious levels of investment on schemes of this size. The transition to net zero requires us to stop and take stock before installing or changing anything. A good example might be a refurbishment of hotel rooms where they might be changing the fan coil units within the rooms or the heat emitters that are used. They need to be considered in the light of changing to heat pump solutions where temperatures delivered will be lower than fossil fuel burning systems, and so we need to design the systems to allow us to make that change in the future, even if we're not making it right at this point in time. Making sure that when we have a plan, we have the right people to execute the works and the design and the installation is really critical. Not all installers are the same, not all manufacturers are the same, and you can easily see the difference in the good quality equipment and the controls that go with the well designed and well built equipment. Not all installers have the right experience as well, and I think it's really important to see any installer has got good records of schemes they've completed in the past. They should be of similar scale to the type of scheme you're looking for, and they should involve and include some years of data so that they really understand how well their systems have been working and are able to continually improve. Because there is no doubt that heat pump installations can be fabulously efficient, but they can also be very inefficient if they're badly installed. Another example is the Grove Hotel in Watford. This is a much larger site and it does have a canal running through it, so we do have the opportunity for water extraction from the canal to run a system. It's a big hotel that's based around a listed centre, so it's difficult to bring the envelope up to the sort of standards that we would look for now, but there's a limit to how far we can go. But of course we still need to make that hotel net zero carbon. It does have a lot of land around it, so there is an opportunity for a substantial ground-based PV array, solar PV, and all of the works that are undertaken then have to be done in the light of the planned changes. So the sort of example I would give you here is that the refurbishment of the mansion house rooms, which are the mansion house is rather, it's grade 2 listed, so it's difficult to do much to, but we can still improve the quality of the fan coil units and the pipe distribution systems to allow us to run it at much lower temperatures than we would otherwise be doing, and that will make it suitable for a heat pump installation in the future. Even though it's a difficult building, it's perfectly possible to achieve that. River extraction would probably work very well here, and that's one of the plans for this site. So it will be a combination of redesigning the interiors to suit the lower temperatures, large PV installation, probably large scale storage on site, and then large river extraction schemes for the heat pump source. This is an example of a function room within the Grove Hotel. It's recently built, and the reason I've shown this is that invisible AC is a system that I'm very keen on. It allows us to heat and cool with the same system, so you don't have to have separate systems, which is often the way air conditioning is done. It also produces a much higher quality atmosphere in the room. It can be almost totally silent, and you get a very consistent temperature across the whole room, so you can get less than 1 degree temperature differential, so you don't have this feeling of being in the cool or not in the cool, which you often get with air conditioning. The great thing about these systems is that they allow us to run the heat pump simultaneously, heating and cooling. So whilst we're heating the swimming pool or hot water for the bedrooms, etc., we can be cooling this space with the same turn of the compressor on the heat pump. So we've seen and measured that now to achieve over 700% efficiency for long periods of time. So this drives the efficiency of conditioned spaces to be far higher than any other system we could consider. And of course, if we're generating the electricity on site as well, then we get the perfect answer. Turning to a few examples of residential schemes. This is a fabric first house that was built recently and in Hampshire. We went for a high thermal mass solution. It's heated and cooled by a ground source heat pump system simultaneously, and also has invisible AC providing the cooling and some underfloor as well. Interestingly, this whole site, the whole house, runs at something around 5,000 kilowatt hours per year, which for a big house with no compromise on glazing and views, it's in a beautiful location, is pretty astounding. And you could offset the total usage of this house with just 12 or 14 panel PV system, and then you'd be through year net zero, which is fantastic, of course. An example of a net negative through year project is shown here. So this farmhouse has been refurbished. It's been wrapped externally in insulation, and all the windows and doors replaced. It's got lots of glazing and or triple glazing, and ground source heat pump, heating and cooling via invisible AC, and 100 panels or 30 kilowatt peak scheme providing the electricity. It also has a Tesla Powerwall too. So this site has 2 electric vehicles that cover 30,000 miles a year, and the total use for absolutely everything over just over 3 years is shown on this little table. So the total energy use for the farmhouse in total, with the 2 electric cars charged here as well, has been 52,000 kilowatt hours over the 3-year period. Total generated on site through that same period is over 80,000 kilowatt hours. So you can see that's a fairly substantial net generation over and above the use on the site. And that is much more achievable than people would first think, and is very cost effective with a very short payback period. I'd like to hand over now to Gary Wilburn, who's the MD of EP Projects and is chair of the Association for the Environmental Conscious Building, an organisation that I'm very, very fond of, and I believe everybody should be using. They have great resources. Gary's going to talk to us specifically about the fabric first options. So over to you, Gary.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Martin's just said, I'm Managing Director of EP Projects, part of the EP Group. We are known globally as a group for our specialism in all forms of intelligence around energy use, and obviously doing that in the most sustainable fashion. My background is commercial architecture and design, and EP Projects work on projects primarily in the south of England on all scales and various types. My chairmanship of the AECB, of which I'm very proud to be heading up, we have around about 1,800 members UK-wide. I believe us to be the most authoritative group of people, very grand claim across the world, potentially. The AECB gave birth to the Passive House Trust as well, with a parent organisation of that. And very proud of the thoroughness and depth of detail which has been collected by the association over 30 odd years now, and would, as Martin has already said, welcome any of you to join with us in approaching things in a very fabric first manner. So fabric first approach really sits within all that we do and that I extol, whether that's from an architectural design point of view and on net zero carbon, regenerative and positive impact projects that we're engaged with. I would say that's our first starting point, is to reduce the energy use at source, as Martin has already suggested. The super insulation of buildings can often be complex, particularly if they're listed, if they are historic. But generally speaking, dealing with the fabric, whether it's retrofit or new build, is really central, should be the number one go-to in reevaluating and looking at energy use in buildings. And the whole life savings that come out of that from an energy point of view are enormous. I'd leave it to Martin to quote the figures, but the cost of super insulating buildings, having a fabric first approach, is massively outweighed by the energy saving costs that you would then have for the lifetime of the building in its operation and indeed maintenance. So a thoroughness of approach, and this is not just me talking as an early adopter, as a champion of such things. It makes absolute commercial sense on large estates and assets to reduce energy at its source, regardless of all these wonderful things. And I'm a massive supporter of things like Archimedes screws, PV, and all the stuff that Martin has enthused about. But they're just as applicable in the context of new build as they are retrofit, and vice versa. So this focus on thoroughness of process, I think, is key, and an integrative design approach is absolutely essential. Appointment of design teams and technical teams, including key suppliers and contractors, at the earliest possible time. So we look at things, an overused word in architecture, I appreciate, holistically. The holistic approach to evaluating the energy efficiency of buildings is absolutely key in any thought of either refurbishment or indeed new build. And then building a trust and confidence and avoiding what is everyone's enemy, which still continues to be greenwash. We are surrounded by greenwash, people talking in supposed authority about the stuff we're here to to talk about today together, when actually they're not. They're not an authority, and we have to be sure that we're working with authoritative, knowledgeable, skilled people in order to deliver the sorts of solutions that Martin has already talked us through. So I think my main message is thoroughness of approach. And that applies to the planning process, it applies to engagement with stakeholders, and indeed making sure the finance director or whoever's signing off the bills, in Ben's case, in terms of hotels, you've got to make sense in terms of the financial investment and the return. But certainly from mine and Martin's experience, which is pretty lengthy in the industry, it pays dividend and absolutely makes sense. Thank you, and look forward to some questions.
Thanks very much, Gary, and yeah, quite agree with that. So next, talking of people who sign off bills for hotels, Chris Andrews is the commercial director of the Ralph Trustees, of which we've just looked at 2 of his hotels. So over to Chris.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Yeah. Yes. Well, actually, I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk very much about money, surprisingly, in the sense that I'm rather bored of conversations where the conversation starts off with what's the payback. And we've had quite a lot of those for about 20 years. And I think that the thing I would ask and implore everybody is that given we are facing the climate emergency that everyone talks about, and as you said earlier, Martin, there don't seem to be very many concrete plans to deal with it other than words. I think it's beholden upon everybody to look at things in a different way, and to have a kind of more of an inquiring mind, and to take a step back and to sort of challenge the normal ways of doing things, which isn't always easy in the construction world, but it is quite rewarding. Anyway, and so what do I mean by that and challenging? I mean, I think that I was told once, and I think it's a very good analogy, it's a sort of slightly scientific analogy, which is that molecules move incredibly freely in the gaseous state. And as they kind of move into liquid form, they get a bit stickier. And then when they get into solids, obviously they don't move very much at all. And I think that thinking and planning and thoughts are very analogous to that, in the sense that the time when we have the opportunity to think about things and to move and play with things and move them freely around is up front. It's at the plan, it's at the concept and the planning stage. Okay. As we move into post-planning, and we move into sort of tendering and pricing jobs, and then moving on to site, we move slowly into the liquid state and into the solid state, where a lot of the things that we wish we'd addressed earlier come home to roost, and we spend our time trying to move things which have got stickier and stickier, and we all know what the consequence of that is. It's actually money, and it costs lots and lots of money. So I kind of think that the thing that's beholden upon us all at the moment is to up front understand what are the options that are genuinely available to you. I mean, the Runnymede is a good example. I mean, it never occurred to me that it would be a good idea to stick 3 double-decker buses into the river outside the hotel, until I met a highly enthusiastic person who'd done it for Windsor Castle. And it wasn't a challenge. We actually got planning permission. The EA supported it. The EA enjoyed the idea of working out engineering solutions of how to get buses out of the water when it flooded. The problem was the government, because they kept on moving the goalposts, and they kept on putting guillotines down on whether you'd get any RHI. And eventually we had to abandon it because we had no certainty that we could actually build the thing in time for the next impending March deadline. But the point that it did teach me is that you have to actually think about what all the options are and work out which ones will work for you, because there's always something that will work for you. And I suppose if I look at the Grove now, we're in the middle of a refurbishment, right? I mean, the main energy conversations we had when we were building the Grove was the arbitrage between gas and electric prices, and how big was the CHP unit we were going to put in. I mean, thank God we didn't. But today we're faced with a situation where incredibly complicated M&E solutions for a listed mansion, which, going back to your fabric point, is utterly got inappropriate fabric in it. All needs to come out as we're doing new bathrooms. And, we could have quite easily just fallen into the trap of replacing everything as it was before, which come 5 years down the road, when we've got a big, interesting solution of what we can extract from the canals, would have all been a complete waste of time. So in terms of paybacks, I mean, a 20-year design project would have been redundant in 5 years. But what we're doing at the moment is trying to work out how can we put the infrastructure in, and how can we run it from low temperature solutions, or at least have a link into running it with low temperature solutions, so that we're not wasting our money in redoing all the bathrooms and all of the air conditioning in the mansion house. Now, that requires people to want to engage in that conversation, and it requires them to want to engage in the conversation at the beginning, not in the middle. And so I suppose if I've got anything to say, it's, we all have the ability to do something, and we should spend the time working out with the right people what are the actual options we can do. And it won't necessarily be perfect, especially if it involves an existing building, but it'll certainly be an improvement, and it'll be something that is worth making the effort to do. So that's the kind of approach that we're adopting across our portfolio, and accepting the view that there is no one size fits all, and everything just needs to be looked at with an open mind. So that's all I have to say on that subject. And thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I like your analogy of the early thinking and as gaseous thinking. I can identify with that one. So the other side of the equation is, as Chris has mentioned, really being able to engage with people who can properly help us arrive at making sense of solutions. So the next two panelists are very much from that point of view. So I'm going to ask Guilherme to speak now. Octopus Energy have been a great partner of ours on a few projects we're working on, and very helpful to talk to them. So over to you, G.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. Yeah, Guilherme Castro, guys. I work for Octopus Energy Generation at the moment. I'm project innovation manager there. And what this fancy name, normally connected to the innovation, means in our journey is exactly how we can help, especially people and customers like Chris, Martin, to think more generation to the market, how we can innovate and we can break the barriers we face especially in the UK market, for new generation to be connected. Octopus is an incumbent on the energy sector in the UK, now globally expanding, and with the idea of using technology, trying to reduce the cost of electricity for everyone, trying to bring more renewable energy connected to the grid, and making this with a transparent, because this was one of the biggest challenges in the UK market, which is really heavily brokered. And when we think the solar development journey, it's really important for us. I think Chris mentioned this aspect of the planning stage and thinking exactly what is the best solution. And when we are discussing renewable generation, especially with the complexities that each project will have, it's not one solution fits all. So we think a solar plant, or we think a wind turbine, it's all the same, but maybe the hardware is the same. Maybe the installation is the same, but the role of that technology in the solution for that customer is something that it's really specific. And that's where we need to understand. And this first stage that Martin is showing here, where we are, and it's the main point of the journey that we have for the growth when we are thinking the proposition, but for any other customer, is the stage that we'd like to dedicate more time to understand first, what is the potential of that technology in your operation? What is the combinations of technologies that we can bring to make value on the renewable generation you are installing? And this is a really important point, because for a long time, the renewable energy, especially the solar installation market, has always looked to the building and said, okay, how much this building consumes of electricity? I'm going to install the capacity to just top up during the day, the consumption that you have on that building specific part. But the problem is, we need more renewable energy. The climate change aspect, the challenge that we have, as more renewable energy you can connect to the grid, the better it will be to reduce the dependency on fossil fuels. But if you don't have the economic, the first stage or the standard definition is exactly what Chris was discussing, is the payback. Is it there? Is it not? And how I'm going to decide to install that system is really important. And what we are trying to do is saying, okay, can I plug a different technology? Can I create, maybe it's a new hardware that I can use? So EV chargers is a good example where you can incentivize the use whilst you're producing with that solar generation. On the other hand, can we think new formats of contracts? Can we think new platforms to unlock this feasibility stage and guarantee that we are installing the maximum capacity of the area rather than just maximizing and optimizing the building load? And that's where we are thinking and working with Chris and Martin on the Grove. But I wish it was all perfect. And from the beginning, we could say, okay, tomorrow we're going to install the solar plant. We have a potential 20 megawatt here. Let's just buy the panels, the infrastructure, and connect to the grid, and that's it. The reality is not this. Center South England is one of the big barriers we have is the grid. So it's the next step on our journey, because with the subsidies era and the part of the planning or the lack of expectations that renewable energy would scale that much in the land, you have a constrained grid today. So connecting certain technologies in certain areas of the country is really hard and requires a lot of investment in grid reinforcement, either paid by the customer or you need to wait a long time if you want to wait for the government to do this investment for the DNOs. And this is a big challenge because if you can't connect to the grid, you cannot export and your project cannot go ahead. So it's a really important stage on this development journey. And the second one is planning. And that is also important to understand and show for the local authorities that the projects that we are bringing live is not just the economic contribution that you're going to have there. There is, and this is a really important part of the Octopus journey, is how we integrate community on this development, on this delivery of the project. Not only from the part of the community ownership, but also if we can incentivize community tariffs. Let's say, imagine in the future, the Grove could create a Grove tariff or the Hotel Hofstra's energy tariff, where employees can benefit from the generation you have on your backyard. And that is where we see the future of a decentralized energy system that is more efficient, is cheaper, and it's fairer with everyone that is there, and based on renewable energy. There is a huge potential. And Octopus is really trying to make this as flexible and simpler as possible for our customers. We have the opportunity, if the customer doesn't have their own capital to invest on the renewable project, we are there and we have a strategy to raise this capital and help the project to become reality, considering the barriers, the challenges that our customers will have, and trying to find the way that our technology can make it more efficient, cheaper, and implementable, even with the barriers we have in the UK energy system today. So I think our message is this, and really appreciated the invite, Martin, and looking forward to answering any questions that you guys have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Guillermo. And yeah, I think it is hugely frustrating that we find when you're trying to do the right thing that we keep bashing up against the government's rules and sort of quangos that actually make this stuff more difficult when they should be making it easier. So hopefully that will change. And next up, Ben Nichols. Ben runs Nichols Boreholes, have masses of experience of thermal boreholes and water extraction boreholes and river extraction schemes. So delighted to have you along as well, Ben, and over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I want to just tell you a little bit about us and our experience, and then a bit about contracting and looking at projects. So we've been working on ground source systems since 2008, and we've installed well over 400 systems, both from very small domestic to large river abstractions, big commercial sites, and we actually do all of it as a company. So we design, supply, install, and we maintain the systems. We've also been very lucky that we've worked with many other installers over the years, and seen a wide range of skill sets, I suppose we could say, within that. One of the things that I wanted to try and get across today was the importance of, and everyone's been talking about this, is understanding really what's the best thing for the site, and understanding that each site or project needs assessing on its own. You can't just take one from one site and put it on another one and hope that it's going to work. And that's it's a real thing that we come across. I speak to people that say, oh, I've got a friend who has this, or they've done that. And I think it's really important that the people with the skill set are involved early on when looking at projects, to both see what's practical. There is the finance to go with it, but what also is the least disruptive for the site, because you can get, we've come across sites and people have got very carried away with their schemes, and I've looked at them often and thought, I don't know whether or not that is being approached properly, but I've come to it way too late. I think when looking at all of these schemes is really understanding the ability of the contractor, I suppose we'll call them, and do they have the experience to work on those types of schemes. So it's very different to install a small domestic ground source with horizontal collectors than it is to do a large river scheme or even a large commercial scheme with boreholes. And so one of the things that I really wanted to get across today was the importance of choosing the right contractor, but also understanding how they can support you in the future, and that they have the support of everybody that they work with. So for example, we get a lot of support from the manufacturers we work with. I think John's going to talk to us in a bit, but I think it's really important not only from our experiences and our mistakes, but also we can get a lot more information from them, and that can go into the pot as well. One of the things that we're very lucky here is that we have designers that look at the schemes as well as the people that run the installers, and so we've been able to really develop the way we install and the quality of the equipment that we use, both products, both the way they're run, whether we can monitor them off-site, and how we can look after the site in the future, because it's all very well fitting a system to sort of be green and do the right thing, but you've also got to look at the longevity of the system and the practicalities of how that's going to work in the future. One of the things that we've seen with certainly open loop schemes from a river historically is just very simple basic understandings where lots of systems being fitted and they haven't considered quite the design properly, and they've used pumps and stuff that come out from the river that don't clean themselves. And so a lot of systems have had real problems where they've just been pumping water, it fills up with debris. And one of the things that we've started to use a lot more, for example, the pumps that we looked at the Runnymede, they self-clean, and it's about making sure that you really understand what you're working with for each site. And I think this is really, really important. With a lot more people coming into the industry, and I really like the heat pump industry. I think it is the future, and I've invested a lot of time and emotion into promoting it over the years. And I think we've got to be sensible about making sure that we fit simple systems without too much fuss, that will work, that can be maintained. And I think that that's something that is very important. Yes, of course, understanding the design for how much heat, understanding the fabric of the building and all the other bits is absolutely crucial at the front end. But at the other end, when it's been installed and everyone's very proud of it and we've walked away, we want to make sure that in 10, 20, 30 years that those systems are still going. And that's when you'll really get your payback. It's not just your grants or your initial investment or what you've calculated. Your real payback is in 30 years time, when they've just been well maintained and looked after these systems, and then they're really working for you. And that's something that I feel quite strongly about, and I would like everybody to listen to that when they're certainly talking to installers and looking at what type of system they're fitting. There is lots of best practice guidance And so there is various areas to refer to, but what we sometimes find is a lot of best practice is written by researchers rather than people with real practical experience. That's my main thing, but I'm very happy to answer any questions around the contracting or the design or the installation that anybody might have going forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. And we will obviously take questions now, but we will also follow up with any suggestions. We're going to do a poll at the end. I think Cynthia will just tell us about it right at the end, of subjects that people might like us to go into a bit more detail. So we'll go into that. So John's going to finish for us. John Felgate's Technical Director of Stiebel Eltron in the UK. They're one of the top end heat pump manufacturers, and John is a technical whiz when it comes to helping us make these systems work well. So over to you, John. Oh, unmute. You need to unmute him.
There you go. I think I'm unmuted.
Right.
Yes, hello, and thank you. As Martin said, my name's John Felgate. I work for a heat pump manufacturer called Stiebel Eltron, and I'll spend just 5 or 6 minutes talking about what I've learned from working with heat pump technology over the last 15, nearly 20 years or so. And as with the other guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the topic. So from listening to you all, I think there's 3 steps to a successful heat pump project that delivers great energy and CO2 savings, and of course a return on investment. I'd also like to suggest a slightly controversial extra step, which I'll mention at the end. But the first step, and arguably most important, is getting the design of the system right. I agree with all of you. From a heat pump perspective, though, what I'm here to talk about, the efficiency of a heat pump system boils down to just one thing, and that's the difference between the temperature of the energy it harvests from the environment and the temperature that the building requires. So imagine a system that's very cold source temperatures, say -10, and it's heating radiators to 70 degrees. That's a big difference, 80 degrees between the two. And at that point, the heat pump will not be at its most efficient. But compare that to a system that harvests energy from the environment at maybe +10 degrees, like the River Thames, and is heating systems in the building using water heated to 40 degrees. Difference is only 30, and the heat pump will be super efficient. So wherever possible, we should fight to keep the difference between the source, be it river, water, like in the Runnymede, or a borehole, or even the air. Whatever, the difference between the source and the temperature that the building requires must be as small as possible. All too often, I see the design temperatures creep up during the design stage process, usually because one aspect of the system demands high temperatures, and you end up running the heat pump hot just to support that relatively small load of the swimming pool or the air handling unit. Something like that messes up the system's performance. Second step, apply the technology wisely. Again, echoing what others have said before me, look at which parts of the building or the project can be served by a heat pump. It's usually best to apply heat pump technology where the energy use is greatest. That way the heat pump works hard for you and your return on investment is good. Just harking back to me going on about temperatures earlier, it may be that the heat pump should supply energy for only part of the building, the part that can run off low temperatures. There's always a solution somewhere. Secondly, look at where you can get the energy from the environment in the easiest way possible. We've looked at roofs today and rivers and boreholes. You might have a fabulous resource on site, like a river or a lake, or even the sea. We've done that. But if you can access it easily and you've got that resource on site, you should use it. Use the manufacturer's advice was the other thing. They're free. We're free, usually. Why wouldn't you? We've been involved with thousands of projects and we can give you advice. Lastly, and this is the slightly controversial extra step I mentioned earlier, as I said, I've been working with heat pumps for nearly 20 years, and I still love learning from each project. I monitor thousands of heat pumps in the UK that we have connected to the internet. I self-confessed I'm a geek, don't judge me. But my point is that although we do our best to commission the system to maximize the efficiency from day one, sometimes improvements can be made once the system's been running for a few years and we understand the way the building and the people in the building work. We've a project in Oxford, two identical houses which have the same kit installed, but they perform differently because of the people factor that you just can't judge accurately before the building's occupied. And now, you know, both heat pumps are set up differently to suit the lifestyles of the people living in those buildings. This sort of controversial and awkward stage of going back to a project or monitoring it online so that you can improve its efficiency over years and years and years can be a bit awkward, because people would have expected you to do it right first time, and you can face a bit of criticism over that. But with careful handling, I think it's an important process to go through. You know, don't just set those heat pumps sailing off in the distance without looking after them. Commissioning is incredibly important, and I'd encourage using the manufacturer whenever possible. Yeah, but go back a year or so later and tweak the system if possible, or even better, monitor it online and learn from it. Okay, I've been waffling on for 5 minutes, so thank you for listening. As I said earlier, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So I think it's probably back to Cynthia and Martin now for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, John. And yes, I'm a big fan of monitoring things once they're in use and tweaking them and gradually improving them. And start low, because John's point about the differential of temperatures. You know, if you can heat the house at 35 degrees, which you should be able to do if it's properly designed, then you will get substantially more efficiency out of the system than if you have to go to 50 or 55 degrees. So these things are easily sort of glided over by the installers, because it's easier to provide something that works and nobody complains about, but uses more energy that people don't find out about until later. So that's sort of the way it is. So Cynthia, do we have some questions that we'd like to pick up right now?
So any questions from the attendees, please pop them in the Q&A box and we can answer those. To kick us off, I have a question for John about the controversial point you made, which I think is quite a sensible thing, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about, you know, once a house has been lived in for a while and the system needs a few tweaks, what are the sort of usage factors that will cause some tweaks to be helpful?
So I think it's, in my experience, it's people. So we all do the design based on, you know, CIBSE guides or whatever we use, you know, different temperatures in different rooms and air change rates and all of that kind of stuff. Then people move in, and some of them want it hot, some of them want it cold, some of them throw all the windows open as soon as they get home, and some of them use an awful lot of hot water as well. That we've noticed. You know, we've certainly, going back to those projects in Oxford, one house, we've increased the power that the heat pump delivers for hot water, just because that particular family get through a lot. I said, you know, like I said, not judging, but they do get through a lot of hot water. So yeah, I think it's mostly to do with people rather than the building. But yeah, I think there are, as I said, there's significant efficiencies or increases in efficiency you can make if you just look. You don't have to go back year on year for years and years, but you know, perhaps if there's a maintenance contract in place, you know, just have an eye on it. And if you can tweak the temperatures down a couple of degrees, you know, you'll probably save them 5 or 10% of their running costs.
Great.
But the controversial bit is they'll then come after you and say, well, in that case, you owe me for the 5 or 10% difference there. You should have done it right in the first place. So yeah, you've got to be a little bit careful, but I think it's still worth going through anyway.
Yeah, brilliant. That's really helpful. Thank you, John. Now we have a question here from James Egan, who's asking, is there a size or usage threshold where PV and/or heat pumps are the most and least efficient?
Is that one for me or Martin, do you think?
Feel free.
A few people could comment, but yeah, go on, John. You've got a big experience of that.
So I'll have a go. The thing is with heat pumps is as soon as they start, they require a minimum amount of electricity. All the heat pumps we manufacture are inverter driven. But still, at their lowest speed, they'll require a certain amount of energy. So I think there probably is a threshold, although I haven't done the maths as to where that break point is. If you had, let's say, a massive heat pump and a tiny PV array, you would probably not be right in saying, I'm running my heat pump from the energy I harvest from the roof. Maybe not. Perhaps the PV energy would be being used in battery storage or for appliances in the house and that kind of thing, but perhaps not the heat pump. So yeah, it's a good question, and I'll sit down in a darkened room and figure it out with lots of graphs and spreadsheets.
Great, thank you, John. Chris, you had some thoughts.
No, I was actually going to touch base on the previous comment, which was about people. I couldn't agree with you more, because we're all used to a society where everything is instant. So you turn up heat, you turn it down, you can deal with all of the needs of what people want, and you can deal with instant hot water, and you can deal with all of those things. And those behavioural traits are not best suited to the heat pump and solar world. Yeah, you have to effectively get used to certain ways of behaviour which work and certain ones which don't. But that's not difficult. It just requires a little bit of an adjustment. But I think that it's a very soft sell, and it's not best sold usually by an installer or a salesman, because they're not there to tell you how to live your life, even though it's quite important, as John just mentioned.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I see Guillermo. Oh, Gary, please.
Come on, Gary, we need to unmute you.
Yeah, so yeah, just listening to what Chris and John were saying. So one classic example of human behavior is where we've installed, which I've been involved with for well over 30 years, underfloor systems, underfloor heating systems. You know, and people getting used to that instant effect, which Chris and John have just been talking about. And they don't get an instant effect if you've got an underfloor system. Of course you don't. It takes time. It's a bit like having a duvet under your floor, isn't it? Or whatever you want to call it. But in the context of this human behavior thing and reacting and responding, we've got an amazing, as Martin knows, plethora of human behavior commentary and monitoring and data and historic information over the past 30 odd years within our AECB membership. And it's quite astonishing. And it would be great for the sort of mainstream, if you like, rather than just the anoraks like John and I. Sorry, John, you did say you were. Rather than just the anoraks taking on board all of this information, the fact that we share within the AECB organization where we've all made mistakes. And it's learning from the mistakes and that informing and being honest with people from a behavioral point of view. I don't think it is, it's not a bad subject. It's a really great subject, and people should be more honest about it at the outset of all projects.
That's a great point. Thank you. So we've got two more questions here, and we've got about a minute left. So I noticed, Guillermo, you're typing an answer there around SEG payments. So I'm just going to move. In fact, we've got a couple more. How worthwhile are MVHR systems, and are the one-room systems worthwhile? Who would like to take that?
I can tell you a little bit about it from a hotel point of view, but and then maybe actually Gary probably have a comment on this. But I've done hotels where we've used whole floor or whole building MVHR systems, which is which I think it makes the most sense. Single room systems, there are some quite good ones out there that are pretty quiet. But of course, as soon as you go to single room systems, it means every room has got a filter that needs cleaning, and it makes the maintenance issues higher. The efficiencies are probably not much different, but you should get a better efficiency out of a whole house system. And in principle, when you've got a whole building, you're trying to make the whole building breathe, really. So just treating one room on its own wouldn't get my vote, really, unless there's some particular reason why it's difficult to do a whole house. I don't know if you've seen Premier Inns more recently, but Premier Inns now have a room by room solution, and so they're, which rather does a bit of damage to their elevations, in my view, because it looks like it's been fired at by a square rifle from lots of places. But you know, that's the way they've moved to treat it. We did do some early ones of theirs using MVHR on a floor by floor basis. So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to add to that, Gary? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that again, we're back to this sort of holistic view, aren't we? That, you know, an MVHR is a good example. I think we've all seen examples of it done badly, and it really, in many respects, although some manufacturers might disagree, it doesn't suit itself to just a singular room in a property, in a house or a dwelling. You need to do the whole thing to really get best benefit. Now, that then brings in the cost issue for those of us that aren't endowed with budgets to do a whole approach. And it brings you back to, you know, fabric, you know, getting your insulation right first, whether you're building new or retrofitting. And certainly MVHR is very silent running, low energy use, and when installed correctly by proper professionals like the group of people we've got here together today, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a no-brainer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. You, I'm conscious of time, but please do chime in.
Also conscious of time. You can tell me to shut up if you like. I won't be offended, but I've got a question for the group and everybody who's listening, really. I'm completely on board with the fabric first thing, 100%. However, I wonder how much you should spend on fabric first before you consider spending money on renewable technologies. I wonder if there's a tipping point. I get this question from you know, local authority housing association type of projects where they're looking at upgrading the fabric of the building. And they ask me, you know, how good do I have to get? You know, because it's almost like a curve, isn't it? You could spend money on a, you know, your triple glazed argon filled windows and super duper insulation and air tightness and all of that. Or maybe you get it to a point, maybe there's a metric you say, you know, how many watts per square meter of heat does it need, where you say, actually, it's more efficient or better spending my money to put some solar panels on the roof or buy a heat pump or do, you know, something like that. So it was just a conversation about that, really. I wondered if anybody else had sat down and tried to figure it out.
It's one of the big issues for me, and Gary knows, and he might have a slightly different view of this than me. I don't know, but you know, I think one of the problems with just concentrating on the envelope is that it avoids all the discussion about all the other energy we use. And actually, as we make houses better, the energy used for heating obviously becomes a smaller and smaller proportion of the total energy. So it then becomes much more sensible, in my view, to say, let's look at our total energy and include electric cars. We're all going to be in electric cars in 5 years' time. So we might as well include that in the discussion and try and come up with a solution, like the example I showed you of, or I put up on the screen, where all of that is taken into the equation, and you put your capital investment, which will be limited for most people, but make sure it's going towards the most cost-effective bit, and that may be to get to, you know, 80% of the improvements in the envelope, and then spend, as you rightly say, the rest on other issues that will actually give you a much better in the round solution. So I think that's a really valid point, and I'd love to see more discussion about it, really.
I think it's almost a subject for the next webinar, Martin.
Maybe. Well, it's a subject I'm very passionate about, so I'd be very happy to do that. But
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's great. And John, just to reiterate, I think pragmatism has to lead the day.
Yeah.
I think authorities and all people that are looking to adopt a net zero approach in a very large fashion, they're all battling with it, and we're all out there trying to answer the questions. Not everybody is committed enough or able to afford the process of being certified passive house, and not everybody can be allowed to be at the other end of it, where they've got such leaky buildings that no matter what renewables we put on, they'll never pay their bills. And we've got to apply pragmatism and sensibility to all the learning we're all going through, haven't we?
Right. So Gary's comment there segues nicely into the poll, because we'd love to do more of these. And for all the attendees, I've got a little poll here that I'll launch onto your screen now with some options where you could just let us know any topics that you'd be interested in for future use, for future webinars. And equally, what I'll do is I will add a contact email address into the chat where you can let us know if there's anything else, any other topics that perhaps aren't listed that we can talk about. So that would be really great. So we've got almost half of the participants answered. So if anyone else has got an idea of topics there, that would be great. You can also type in the comments if you have anything else, or email here. Martin, are you happy for me to put your email address?
yeah, of course. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and of course, I know there's quite a few people who were unable to attend, and they'll be watching this as a catch up. But of course, we'll put their votes into the equation as well, and we'll add that suggestion that's come out of that last discussion as a topic, because I think that's an excellent idea. So, thank you.
Absolutely. So I would love to invite some brief last thoughts. Maybe Ben, have you got any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Sorry, yeah, just to carry on from what John was saying about, so we have a lot of experience in retrofitting older buildings. We've been very lucky, we've got quite a good client base, and we've done a lot of work on older sort of rural houses. You know, we're in West Sussex, we have quite a few of them around here, all trying to get away from oil and things like that, and trying to understand exactly with the fabric what we were talking about with that, and how far you can go against using renewable energy. And I know when I got into heat pumps, it was, everybody told me that you could only put heat pumps in brand new buildings and you couldn't retrofit and you couldn't do anything with it, you know, unless it was a new hoof house or something like that, which I can categorically say is not the case. So it's just really understanding with the building contractor and getting the experience of the team, and that includes the installer as well as the designer, that can really understand what's the best thing for that client, and really understanding what their requirement is and also what their motivation is, because people have different motivation around what they're after when they want a system. So and it's very easy to put your motivation onto the client, whereas you really got to really listen to what are they doing it for, why do they want to do it, and what do they want out of it. I do heat pumps in central London where they'll never pay back the cost of their investment doing boreholes in basements for their houses, but they're not doing it for the return on investment. They're doing it because they believe that they're doing the right thing environmentally. So you be very careful not to prejudge that when you look at jobs. It's very easy to go to a job and think, I know what they're after, but it's really important to understand what we're trying to get to at the end of it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ben. And Guillaume, thank you for answering the question to Alan about the SCG payments that Octopus provides. That was really helpful, and I'm sure Alan is pleased to hear it, because I think this could really help him. So Octopus does provide SCG payments for businesses as well. Is there any other thoughts that you would like to share?
I think that it's really exciting, the discussions about people-centered actions. And I think Octopus has innovated on how we create our own tariffs and how we put the customer in the front of what we are developing. We have several tariffs, and we are deploying as much technology as possible to show how generation and demand needs to be matched, especially incentivizing us to change behavior and benefiting and rewarding when we are doing the right thing. So if the sun is shining, the wind is blowing outside, probably is the best time you should turn on your washing machine or your kettle and make your tea. And this is really important to create the awareness how the energy system works. Sometimes we are too complicated in the way that we explain technology and how it operates. And we need to think that not everyone will be as geeky as us on the technologies that are available and how the energy system works. And this is, I think, a really important message. Everyone can contribute, and we are trying to incentivize and simplify how the energy system works with technology, with innovation. And that is our mandate, and all the help is more than welcome. So if you have an idea, if you are interested, and we are always open to discuss with our customers, partners, and creating new partnerships to make this transition possible. We are really technology agnostic. We are big incentivizers of heat pumps with solar, renewable energy. It needs to be green. So that is, I think, the first message, and also with a fair price for the customers that we bring and offer the solutions. Thank you very much for the invite, and it was a really thoughtful discussion that we had here today.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. And Howard also says in the comments, just wanted to thank all the panelists for a very interesting conference, and he looks forward to hearing more. So thank you very much, Howard. Any other final thoughts?
Thank you again to all the panelists. Oh, Gary.
Well, Martin, I just simply to Cynthia and Martin for organising this, getting everybody together and doing it. Discussion is king of all, isn't it? And it's just fantastic to be taking part in such discussions, and hope we can do more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Martin.
No, I was only going to say I think we've covered everything. The only point I meant to make when we were talking earlier was that some businesses may think that they don't have the capital to invest in some of these bigger schemes. But one of the nice things about the work we've been doing with Octopus Energy is that they do, I mean, G did touch on it, but they do have the financing available or financing schemes available to finance these things. So actually, on a lot of the models we do them based on completely external finance to the client, which means that it doesn't mean that you can't invest, because you could invest, and we're doing this with Chris and the Ralph trustees. They will probably do the investment themselves, but it's modeled on the basis of external investment, so that you've always got that option, and there's always a route forward, whatever the solution that you end up with. So just wanted to make that point. But anyway, thank you all very much. Thank you to everybody who's listened, and to our people who listen to this on catch up, and we hope to speak to everyone again.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you all
Have a good day, guys.
so much. Apologies for running over a little bit, but this was a great session, so thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers, guys.